Hello and welcome to The Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. I'm Alex.
I'm Julio, and thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, head over to Apple Podcasts to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Help promote the algorithm and spread the word.
You can also find us on SoundCloud to subscribe and review, and don't forget to visit our main website, wearethecontrarians.com.
Follow us on Twitter at Contrarian Prime, and to like us on Facebook, visit facebook.com/Contrarian Prime.
And if you have the willpower to keep up with our pretentious ramblings, you can follow us individually at Contrarian Alex for myself and at Ovnio for Julio. That's OVNIO.
Now, time for the podcast. Okay, I am recording.
I am as well. Hello, and welcome back to The Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. My name is Alex, joined as always by my co-host Julio. Julio, how are you doing? I was going to say it's kind of a cool Wednesday evening, but you said things are a bit hot where you're at right now.
Yeah, I don't know if it's my side of Austin that got hotter or just the fact that I turned the fan off in my little office and now I'm feeling it. It was hotter earlier. I don't know. Whatever the case, quarantine life. What am I complaining about? Like I mentioned in our last episode, spending most of my time playing video games. So really, in a way, I'm living the perfect life as my teenage self wanted so long ago.
I can definitely relate to that. But I don't know. It could just be the heat from 1988 Alec Baldwin and 1988 Gina Davis. That's just absolutely lit your trousers asunder.
It's entirely possible. Plus the heat just building off Tim Burton and Winona Ryder's rising stars as they were breaking through into the mainstream.
Yes, unlike for Mr. Deeds, we will not be commenting on how hot Winona Ryder is in this movie. But
no.
We can save that. I was literally distracted at certain points just staring at Gina Davis in this movie. So much to talk about. But we are here continuing on the summer of Winona, #WinonaVirus 2020, coming off the heels of the poorly received Mr. Deeds in 2003. We're going back in time because as with quarantine and as with the summer of Winona, time is not linear. We're being liberal here and bouncing around, and we landed in 1988, which was weird to me because I could have sworn from my childhood this movie came out in like 91 or 92. I remember it in that point in my life. I would have been one maybe when this movie came out. No, I wasn't even one yet.
Okay, so your memories can't be trusted. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Beetlejuice, I think on the upper tier of movies we've done with the most legendary of legacies and contributions to pop culture. It's got to be up there. I mean, obviously we did the Avengers and there's a couple other ones, but Terminator obviously, but this is in the upper tier of like what people would consider the all-time cultural footprints, at least of our lifetimes.
Now, when you think of Beetlejuice, do you think of it as a Tim Burton movie, a Michael Keaton movie, or a Winona Ryder movie?
Oh, Tim Burton, absolutely. Because it's like, to me, bleeding a little bit into real talk, but it's definitely like Burton at his most controlled, I think. Restrained is also a good word to describe it. I think it works out. It brings all the things that Tim Burton loves to do, all the cliches together in a very colorful vomit.
So flattering.
But yeah, to your point that up until just a few years ago, I think they were still trying to get a sequel made. But even at its time, it was well received. I was trying to figure out while you were talking there how Universal comes into the fray, because I know Beetlejuice is one of the characters that you can, get your picture, or in a past life could get your picture taken with at Universal Studios. But this, of course, was a Geffen Company movie and distributed by Warner Brothers. I don't know. That's something for me to look into at another time, another day. But bringing back the Summer of Winona, bringing it back to the forefront. Beetlejuice here, the second entry. We're going back from the rotten side of things with Mr. Deeds to the fresh side, as this movie is ranked, at 84% on Rotten Tomatoes. And if this is your first time listening to The Contrarians, we do appreciate your listen. If you're returning, we appreciate you as well. Give us a second while we run over our spiel for new listeners. We like to rage against the Rotten Tomatoes machine is what we say. We find a movie on Rotten Tomatoes that's highly rated, sometimes known as certified fresh, and make a case for what might not be so good about it. On the other side of that coin, find a movie that's rotten, make a case for its positive merit. We typically stick with 90% above, but as the Winona virus is fresh, we're making some exceptions here. And the 84% Beetlejuice, we're going to be making a case for maybe why it shouldn't be regarded as, one of the more wildly heralded sci-fi comedy.
Dark fantasy. I still, my main thesis going into the Summer of Winona is that I'm a bigger Winona Ryder fan than you are. And so the question to me on each individual movie is just going to be how your perception of Winona Ryder compares to mine, more so than the perception of the movie overall. So that will be interesting, especially if we ever get to a movie where you like the Winona Ryder performance more than I do.
I mean, you picked an interesting movie for that because she's absolutely overshadowed and towered over by almost everyone else in this cast. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays in.
Oh, man. I wonder if we're heading towards a real talk where, once again, I'm just 90% of the time I'm just defending Winona Ryder against your attacks.
I wouldn't be worried about that. It's more going to be me talking about how incredible Catherine O'Hara is and how Michael Keaton's the man.
All right. Well, we can go into quotes before we head into Contrarian's Corner proper.
Let's do it.
Okay. So we have two positive clips from fellow podcasters and friends of the podcast. We're going to go first with Ben from Filmbusters.
Hiya, guys. So this was an unusual one for me because I haven't seen Beetlejuice in over a decade. And when I did watch it in my very late teens, early 20s, I really loved it. I loved its quirkiness. And watching it after a 10-year period had me kind of worried going in, and clearly my cat too, because he's voicing his opinions. One thing I will say is Tim Burton's golden days were very much this period. The late 80s to the mid, maybe late 90s, Ed Wood kind of time. That was a special time for him, and clearly it was a special time for him because he also discovered Winona Ryder and put her in this film. Now, the film is fantastic. Michael Keaton blows me away considering he's only on screen for about 20% of the runtime, but Winona Ryder is incredible considering this is one of her first performances. She plays that, not angsty, but that, trope gothic teen that just wouldn't appear in films now because it would be too on the nose. Back then, I don't know that it was on the nose, so I think she worked great in that role. But what was going on with her hair? Sometimes it was like soaking wet, drips down her forehead, and like in another scene, it's hugely puffed up. The hair was the star of the show, really, it was. But Winona was great here, and I'm so glad that she sort of landed on the map, so to speak, with a film like this.
I don't know if Ben's cat was agreeing or disagreeing with him. I guess we'll have to ask for follow-up on how the cat feels about the next entries in the Summer of Winona. And then we have another clip from Mitch from Geek Elite Media.
Okay, I'll say this right now just to get it out there in the open, and I can catch all the flack in the world. I do not like Tim Burton movies. However, Beetlejuice is one of the best. It's obviously the best. I was a new kid in my hometown, when I moved there when I was 6, and the kid across the street invited me to come over to his house, and every day after school for probably about 6 months, we watched the beginning of Beetlejuice. Why only the beginning, you say? Well, because we could only spend about an hour hanging out, because after that it was time to go home. And then you have Winona Ryder is introduced to me as a young person. Her ability to act and her ability to make you laugh, make you contemplate this young girl's life of self-inflicted solitude. Definitely one of my favorite performances of hers, and I would go on to love her in many other productions after this. This is Mitch from the Geek Elite Media Podcast saying, always remember to geek out.
I wonder if Mitch knows how the movie ends. Has he has he gotten around with it?
Has he ever
Has he-
finished it before?
Yeah. Maybe he'll hate it. Since he seems to hate Tim Burton movies, maybe the last 30 minutes is where the movie would lose him.
I'd forgotten how memorable the opening credits for this were, and how much I missed the Geffen signature, that little sphere that turns into a G. That definitely, even though they only released maybe 20 movies for whatever reason, that definitely, just seeing that fills me with nostalgia. So, Beetlejuice, we are in a rural Connecticut town, and, you think our main characters, we don't even meet our titular character for a fucking half hour, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. The first two characters, I guess I would say are leads, but that turns out not to be the case because Tim Burton just can't make up his mind. But the first people we see in this are Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, man, the steam was rising for both of them. It was just like, I'm trying to think, I guess the modern equivalent would have been Passengers with Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence on screen at the same time. Just too much hotness to handle. And Alec Baldwin, man, just his boyish charm here.
Yeah, but they're trying to kind of tamp down the hotness. Baldwin is not playing the usual Baldwin character. He's wearing glasses. He's a little nerdy.
Mm-hmm.
And Gina Davis, she's just the entire movie she's wearing this dress that's not revealing at all. So it seems like a kind of a cheat to cast such attractive people and then work against that from the very beginning. It's almost like this entire movie is Tim Burton just trying to push his views. And I guess one of his views is attractive people should not flaunt it. They should just hide it as much as possible.
And we did get in the opening credits, Michael Keaton got the "and" credit. And Michael Keaton is Beetlejuice. And I guess this was probably within his first dozen movies he made. I feel that this was probably the one that made him a household name. I know he had made Night Shift before this, which is awesome. And if you've never seen that movie, you should definitely seek it out. But this was, I think, safe to say, his coming out party. So much so that he was given the very lauded "and" credit.
This is what got him Batman. Without Beetlejuice, you don't get Batman.
No, not at all. Also, the score was composed by Danny Elfman. Do you know what iconic television theme song that Danny Elfman composed? That would, I guess, appeal to me.
The Beetlejuice animated series.
I can't confirm nor deny that one, but he he did the opening for Mask of the Phantasm, and he wrote the theme song to The Simpsons. So 2 for 2, and as far as my world goes,
I didn't know that. Definitely not the Simpsons thing, and that just shows that how much artists can grow once they get out from under the shadow of people like Tim Burton. Because Danny Elfman, I mean, basically, anytime he works with Tim Burton, he just does the same thing over and over. So it's good to know that he could stretch out, open up.
That he
his
got
wings
out there and he flexed his wings.
Yeah, he can do other things other than the quirky goth Tim Burton style themes.
So our main two characters, Alec Baldwin, Gina Davis, Adam and Barbara Maitland, they just have this home they've worked so hard on in Connecticut, and it's their pride and joy, and it looks like a really nice little, just quiet, quaint town. They just run in downtown to pick up some stuff at the hardware store, just run a few errands, and wouldn't you know it, on their way back, they swerve going over a bridge to not hit a dog, and swerve right into the, I guess the creek, the river, the ravine, what have you, on the side. And we quickly learn, I think the audience learns before they do, that they died in this crash.
Did it seem to you like the crash was not the kind of crash that would kill you? Because to me, it felt pretty weak sauce.
Yeah. I was kind of like, why don't they just climb out the side? And, I also have a hard time believing in a town that small and idyllic that creek isn't only, 6 or 7 feet deep. I think they probably just they Thelma and Louised it. They're just like, let's just keep going.
Yeah, Baldwin was trying to open the door, and Gina Davis just reached and grabbed his hand and just shook her head. So it's not worth it.
So they return back home. They obviously, things are askew with them mentally and physically. Their reflections not showing. When they try to leave the house, they're transported to this, dire wasteland where there's this gigantic snake that's trying to eat them. And then, of course, I think the dead giveaway is they stumble across a book that says Handbook for the Recently Deceased.
Handbook for exposition. That's crazy that Tim Burton's idea of the afterlife is that you're trapped in your house and you're surrounded by bad green screen. I understand it was the late 80s, but there have to be better movies, better looking special effects. Those sand snakes that populate the outside world, they just look like Sesame Street puppets. If the whole idea is that this is supposed to be horrific, it doesn't work. Because if I was Alec Baldwin or Gia Davis, I would just kind of shrug, maybe laugh a little, sing a song with them.
Yeah, I had my notes. Didn't take long for Burton to Burton. Because, everything's kind of just normal, but then all of a sudden one wrong step and they're in this really weird wasteland. So much like the Summer of Winona, time's not particularly linear, so we don't know how much time does or doesn't pass, but we are introduced to the new family that's moving into this house. Obviously, Adam and Barbara aren't entirely sure what's going on, but we, the audience, see Jeffrey Jones, Catherine O'Hara, and Winona Ryder, a.k.a. the A-Team. The 1992 men's Olympic basketball team of acting trios move into this house together. And if I understand correctly, Jeffrey Jones is Charles, Lydia's dad, and then Delia is her stepmom.
Yes, but we don't find that out until maybe, I don't know, 3/4 of the movie in, because, they refer to her as mom. Jeffrey Jones will say, like, hey, don't talk to your mom like that. And it's so to me, because this is a Burton movie and people don't act like real people, I was just like, oh, I guess that this mother-daughter relationship is really twisted, the way that they behave towards each other. But then much, much later, she says something, she corrects either Gia Davis or Alec Baldwin. It's like, no, she's my stepmom, my mom. It's like, okay, you had a whole book of exposition about the afterlife. You can have dropped a little bit of exposition about your main characters just so we understand this very important relationship.
Along with them for the ride, and I guess for the interior decorating, is Otho, who is a friend of Delia, played by Glenn Shaddix. And
did you know that Cam from Modern Family was this old? Because I didn't realize that he had a career like back in the late 80s.
I was about to say he is a fashion plate, and that would also apply to Cam from Modern Family. Otho and Delia are dressed like they're in a different movie than everyone else, but I guess that's just Tim Burton being cute and quirky.
I mean, Winona Ryder is dressed like no one else, and I don't really understand what the logic is behind her outfits. I just kept thinking it must be really hot.
Well, that's fitting of her character. She's just like gothic girl on summer vacation, whereas like Catherine O'Hara and Glenn Shaddix are dressed like they're fucking in Joel Schumacher, one of his Batman movies. It's off-putting, to say the least. Or distracting, I guess would be a better word. But anyway, they're moving in. Catherine O'Hara wants to turn this into this big, designer, chic, GQ type house. It was at this point that I got distracted and started doing research because they kept showing those static outside shots of the house, and I kept thinking it was the fucking Psycho house, but it wasn't. Yet, because it looked like it. When's the last time you saw Psycho? First off, Julio.
It's been a while, but I think I have a pretty vivid image in my mind of the house, at least from the outside when you see the hill.
Yeah. I just like the silhouette of the house, the profile of it. It was playing tricks on my mind.
Burton just got in your head.
Yeah,
Burton
well, I was just about to say he burrowed in there. Now I have to say his name 3 times to let him out.
Just say good movie, and you'll just come out of the Beetlejuice spell. So Jeffrey Jones, he's kind of like a
Principal
tricky,
Rooney.
Yes, more infamously known though now as just kind of like a malign figure along the Kevin Spacey lines. He was like Me Tooing before Me Too was a thing. So I approach the Jeffrey Jones angle of this of my notes with caution, as in like, listen, we're not gonna replace him with Christopher Plummer, but I'm just gonna acknowledge that he's there, and which really is kind of like what the movie does to him. Like what's the biggest quirk that Tim Burton gives him? It's just that he likes birds. Catherine O'Hara and Winona Ryder they outquirk him by so much. He's almost like a non-entity.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't really know of his legal woes, so I was just reading about them right now as you were talking, and I was like, good Lord.
I know.
Uh,
I had to pause. If we might slide a little bit into real talk, the movie had started, and I remember liking the dad character, and I was like, "Fuck, it's that guy." And then I looked it up, and I was like, "My God, I can't really enjoy this." So it took a little bit of work to like disassociate. If we're not gonna get into it. If you listeners are curious, if you don't know the Jeffrey Jones saga, just look it up. It's gonna make you get into that exercise of separating art from the artist once again.
yeah. The only reason I know his name is Principal Rooney and fucking Ferris Bueller is just the Rooney, the just yelling of it over and over again is just embedded into my brain. Regardless, Charles Chuck, as Beetlejuice eventually calls him, it's not like he has too much of a story here. His story is that he's the dad. He likes living there because he likes the quietness and also the ability to take advantage of the locals because they don't understand how valuable their property is. The American dream, as it were, the American tale. And he is pretty much just a pushover. He's definitely just kowtows to everything that Catherine O'Hara wants, and he doesn't particularly pay mind to much of what his daughter says. On the other side of the coin, the original inhabitants of the home, I guess technically speaking, their name may have still been on the deed at this point. Adam and Barbara are all watching this from afar, afar being the attic where they have hunkered down, locked themselves in, not knowing really what to do. They eventually learn, though, that no one can see them. Basically, they're trying to figure out what to do, and they are like me when it comes to a book. They buy a book or they're given a book, and they want to read it, but they just don't. They might pick it up and thumb through it at some point, but they have a really hard time committing. I blame mine on serious ADD. I think theirs is probably more on the sense of still accepting that they fucking died.
But see, Alex, you have the excuse of having a life. They have nothing else to do. They can't leave the house. They can't even clean. I mean, Gina Davis is like dusting, and she keeps complaining that there's too much dust and they can't get the vacuum cleaner because they can't leave the house to go to the garage. So really, there's no excuse why they shouldn't have read that book cover to cover within the first week of being dead. And I'm hoping that you don't do this, but the other thing they do is they thumb through the book and then they complain when what they read doesn't make sense. It's like, well, because you have to read in order.
They watched Endgame first and then didn't understand why it didn't make sense.
What does she mean that he took everything away from her? Why doesn't he know this?
While they're trying to figure out what exactly they're going to do to, help their situation and potentially drive out the Dietzes, we see our first appearance of Michael Keaton in this. As these things happen with ghosts, a TV just turns on its own and plays a commercial for Beetlejuice. Just doesn't explain much of who he is, but it does say that he will perform bioexorcisms. And from this point forward, the movie becomes the Michael Keaton show. We have at it quite often about Judd Apatow, his crew, the Jonah Hills, the Seth Rogans, the Paul Rudds that just, incessantly improvise and aren't really wrangled in or controlled in any way. And that's basically all Michael Keaton does from this point forward in the movie, anytime he's on screen.
He was a big dog. He was from, what was it, Night Shift? Is that the name of the movie?
He looked at Tim Burton and he said, I've worked with fucking Ron Howard. He's like, you don't scare me.
First day on set, he just walked up to Gina Davis and kissed her.
But that wasn't in the script. He just took that into his own hands. But this is literally Tim Burton getting too far ahead of himself and realizing at this point, oh fuck, we didn't show a gun in the first act. We need to shoehorn in something with Michael Keaton. And so that's our quick and brief introduction to Beetlejuice, because it's from here, if I'm remembering the sequential order correctly, that Adam and Barbara figure out how to go to the other side, basically purgatory, to speak to their caseworker.
Yeah, they're like walking around not knowing what to do, and then Alec Baldwin goes like, "Oh, you know what I read in that book that we should have read a long time ago? All you need to do is draw a door and then it opens into the afterlife offices or whatever. Which is, here's the thing. The problem with this movie is, I guess, the problem with Tim Burton, which is a lot of funny ideas, quirky ideas. Imagination is not in short supply. There's plenty of that, and the visuals are creative. As far as ideas go, A+. But the execution, bringing those ideas together in a world that makes sense, that just doesn't happen. And that's a constant problem with Burton's work, and it goes all the way back to, at the very least, this movie. I haven't seen Pee-wee's Big Adventure, so I don't know how that one holds up to the scrutiny of logic. But this one, Beetlejuice, once we go into the afterlife, which you would think would be where anything that doesn't make sense would start making sense. This is where we go behind the scenes and somebody's going to explain to you what's happening, what's the logic behind any of this. That's not the case. You just walk into more chaos, and they get some answers, but really nothing that to me makes sense in the big picture of, they have a caseworker that is not actively trying to work with them. And if the whole purpose of this office is to provide guidance to newly deceased ghosts so that the status quo is maintained, right? Because apparently it's important that they not let themselves be seen, and because they don't want people to know that there's an afterlife. And but it's also they also have permission to try to scare people away. That seems like very contradictory to me. There's no real guidance for them or for us, the audience, in all these scenes in the afterlife bureaucracy, so to speak.
Yeah, all we really learn is that Beetlejuice is bad. He's basically like a member of the afterlife that went rogue and is basically just, commissioning his own jobs now. And when he's unleashed, there's nothing that can, subdue him. And basically he's chaos. That's what we learn from it all, is just don't let Beetlejuice, don't even say his name. Don't let him into the world.
But he's chaos among chaos, because it's not like they're doing much better. I mean, the caseworker, played by the way by Joyce Agent from Friends, she doesn't really seem to have like any good ideas, any suggestions about what to do. She's just kind of like, oh, you guys are really dumb. You should just try harder to scare him away, but don't call Beetlejuice. I mean, it almost feels like she doesn't really want to help them, but everything else that Burton has set up in this world makes me believe that she would want to help them, because it's in her own interest, right? I mean, if that's her job and she wants her job to be easier. So yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me.
No, yeah, we just leave with more questions than we came in. She just basically tells them, well, if you want to get rid of him, just scare him away. You're ghosts after all. My favorite thing, though, leading into it is like they're dead, but they still quibble like married folk. When he draws that door in chalk, Gina Davis is like, you fucking idiot. You think that's actually going to work? And then when it does, he looks at her like, kind of the, I told you to buy the heavy duty trash bags type thing. So all the while, Winona Ryder's on the case. I mean, it is her summer after all. She believes she sees some people in the attic and, believes there's something going on. She tries to get in at one point, and they kind of blockade the door and knock the key out when she tries to enter. So she knows something's going on. Meanwhile, Adam and Barbara
it's never really explained. It's never really explained why she can see them, right?
No,
just because Tim Burton is quirky.
It also is never explained how Jeffrey Jones landed Catherine O'Hara at that point in time, because it doesn't seem like he's particularly smart. But
I think it's more like she landed him, like she pounced. I don't know if Winona's actual mom passed away or left. She probably left Jeffrey Jones, and then he had money, so Catherine O'Hara just went up to him and was like, "Hey, let's get married. I like your daughter."
She thought, he can finance my art projects. This will work perfectly.
Yes,
he's an idiot and he won't talk back. Adam and Barbara take the advice a bit too literally and try to scare the Dietzes as ghosts. They just find some sheets, cut the eye holes out, and just try to do the old boo, woo. Charles does not take them seriously. I think he thinks it's Lydia, actually, so he just dismisses them. Delia's passed out in her bed. She actually fell asleep watching pro wrestling, furthering my love for Catherine O'Hara.
And then Winona Ryder thinks it's her parents. She thinks it's Jeffrey Jones and Catherine O'Hara having some sort of kinky role-playing session. because first she's hearing the moaning and she's rolling her eyes and she's like, I'm just a kid. And then she comes out with her camera, her Polaroid camera, and takes pictures of them and chastises them for not keeping it in the bedroom. And then she realizes that there's no feet there, that there's no feet on when she looks at the pictures. But anyway, the whole thing is, this little sequence is so telling of the entire dynamic of that family, is more economical and more interesting than anything else that Tim Burton does in the movie to tell us how wacky they are.
Mm-hmm.
So if he could just get out of his own way, I think that this movie would be a lot more fun and a lot more subtle.
Yeah. I kept having to remind myself of the time frame because, if this had been released in 2008 or 2018, the hipster level just skyrocketed with the Polaroid camera. And I kept having to remind myself, like, no, that was actually something that was prevalent at the time. And, but she learns quickly, like, oh shit, these are the people I've been seeing. Cause the picture, all she sees is floating sheets. And, it's pretty awesome just because she's like, who are you guys? And then Alec Baldwin just almost in like a Jack Donaghy moment's like, wait, you're not scared of us? And Gina Davis she's so flummoxed and annoyed that she was even in the sheet to begin with. It definitely almost more so than anything fucking Michael Keaton does. This feels kind of just like a more genuine ad-lib scene. It was actually one of the ones I enjoyed more in the movie.
Well, it feels, because they're not trying so hard. That's the thing. The problem with Keaton is that, and thank God he's not in more of the movie, because then it would just be excruciating. But the problem with Keaton is that Burton just let him loose. And he fell back on that tried and true stereotype of the comedian gone wild. I mean, Exhibit A, Jim Carrey, right? He's just hamming it up, making all sorts of voices. It's like, you're not Robin Williams, so don't even try. Don't try to like play 5 different characters in 1 minute. Cut it off with the voices and the asides and the meta humor. Can you imagine if Beetlejuice had been played with more restraint? Then maybe it wouldn't be as memorable, but it also would be a better movie. Because it wouldn't be just like this one character suddenly just taking over the movie. There'll be more balance.
Yeah, my next note actually says Michael Keaton in the house as we see the desperation grow in Adam and Barbara, that they go and visit Beetlejuice, who's now somehow landed in the little model city that Adam had been building. And they go and meet him. They dig him up from his grave. He comes out on wires, the whole act, and this becomes the Michael Keaton show from this point forward. He's off to the races and riffing, talking about God knows what. And then, of course, just kisses and fondles Gina Davis.
At every chance he gets. And Alec Baldwin, he does not react strongly enough, I think. He's just like, stop it. And then he just keeps coming back. It's like when a dog's humping your leg, and you just kind of like hoping that he'll get tired and walk away. It's like, I would think that Baldwin would be a little more territorial. It's Alec Baldwin. He's an alpha male. We know him as that.
Do you know, or have you known, who Michael Keaton based his performance as Beetlejuice off of?
I hope it's Tim Burton.
It is not. According to folklore, Michael Keaton based his portrayal of Beetlejuice off of Bill Moseley in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which, if you or anyone listening has not seen that, I recommend going and watching it, because you will say, oh, I can never unsee this, because Chop Top is Bill Moseley's character's name in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. There are many similarities, and obviously Keaton brought it to a different level with his portrayal of Beetlejuice, but just an interesting tidbit, because they're both very eccentric and have their long rants that clearly aren't scripted. And I think I read 90% of Keaton's dialogue is ad-libbed, and I have no difficulty believing that at all.
What happens when you say Chop Top 3 times?
Oh, I don't know. Leatherface shows up.
Very sneaky.
But Bill Moseley inspired Michael Keaton to show up here as Beetlejuice, rant and rave, and not in really any specific, well laid out terms. I don't. Does he ever explain what he'll actually do? I know that it's just like,
no.
Hey,
he's too busy.
Yeah.
He's too busy riffing. Much like the offices of the afterlife, there's not much sense in what Michael Keaton does as Beetlejuice, because he never explains what his plan is to get rid of the family. He doesn't explain what they would owe him, really, like what the transaction is gonna be like. He's just interested in being funny, and the thing is, as a business model, it's terrible because everything he does just pushes him away.
Yeah, and again, like you said, there's really no clear description of what he does, and it's clear why no one wants to deal with him. And just listen to him talk, and he's very handsy and a perv, and yeah, I don't blame anybody for saying just keep that fucker in the ground where he belongs.
Yeah, this is where Gina Davis, when she's finally had enough, she decides that the way to get home is to say home, 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 3 times, and then it works.
Yes.
Just so what? How does that make sense?
That was not explained to us, but apparently it does work. To be fair, Gina Davis could tell me to do anything 3 times and I would, but
that's true.
Especially 1988 Gina Davis.
My biggest pet peeve though with the Beetlejuice character is just that his name is not spelled the way that it's spelled in the title of the movie.
Beetlejuice.
I know it's a little thing. Yeah, it annoys me so much. I actually went looking into it to see if there were like any deleted scenes that explained why, and no, apparently it's just that the producers or Burton or somebody, they thought that it looked better on the title. That the title looked better spelled as Beetlejuice as opposed to Beetlejuice or whatever, which is the name of a star. Anyway, it's just confusing. Why do you call your movie Beetlejuice when the character is not really named Beetlejuice? It just the things that it's little things like that just drive your audience crazy.
It's we'll have to find one of these for every one of the Winona Ryder movies. Like with Mr. Deeds, it was the constant references to Kill a Mockingbird. In this one, it's why the fuck isn't Beetlejuice spelled the same way? God, can you imagine, like, had it been a time where you and I were working in a movie theater together, if they did spell it how it is, like on the tombstone, the way different customers would pronounce it and shit?
Betelgeuse? Just give me one for the well, what would they say? Would they say give me one for the Michael Keaton movie? I guess, right? Because he was the biggest name. Maybe we have some people coming to the Gina Davis movie.
Yeah, the Ghost movie.
The Ghost movie.
Yeah,
movie with that weird girl that likes to dress in black. I was looking at my notes and I just realized that they do explain why Winona Ryder can see them, sort of. Which is
she read the book.
Winona Ryder. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
She read the book and she figured out that it's something like most people decide to ignore the strange and unusual, and then she has the Winona Ryder line of the movie, which is like she looks at them and she's like, "Hi, myself, I'm strange and unusual."
Yeah,
that's when I realized that Winona Ryder was playing Tim Burton, the female version.
That's gonna be the clip they're gonna play at the in memoriam at the Oscars. Like she'll be one of the people that actually gets a clip. While fucking, I don't know, some YouTuber sings a cover of a fucking Oasis song. Anyway, so Beetlejuice, they realize he is Bad News Bears and really should only resort to him if absolutely necessary. So they form their own plan of how they're going to spook this family and get everyone the fuck out of there. And would you say this is the most iconic scene of the movie, the Deo dinner scene?
Yes, I want to say, yeah. I think that if you're talking about set pieces, this is probably the most memorable. Probably right next to just Beetlejuice Unleashed at the very end.
Yeah, so this is I remember from this scene most vividly from my childhood when I watched it, and anyone who's seen the movie knows. They're all having dinner, and Catherine O'Hara starts singing Deo, at least miming it, and the rest of the table's like, what the hell is she doing? And everyone gets pulled into this synchronized dance sequence, and it's just great. I think
it doesn't make any sense though.
No, and I think it's a Tim Burton movie, dude.
Yeah, that's right.
You're talking about a guy who, in his Batman movie, had a scene. He spent like 30 seconds setting up this one shot where Batman flew his fucking plane and then just went straight up into the air so he could turn, 90 degrees just so it would be the reflection of the moonlight behind it. So it looked like the bat signal, like above the bat signal. That's what you're dealing with here. And
Yeah, he had a smaller budget here, so he couldn't make Catherine O'Hara fly all the way up to the moon and strike a pose. Instead, he just had her sing. That's the name of the song, right, Deo?
yeah, if it's not, then I am
Isn't it like the banana song or
I
something?
am lost if that's not the case. Let's see here. I'll look this up while moving on though.
Oh, but wait. So what I was gonna say is, just in case somebody doesn't understand what I mean when I say it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense that this is something that Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin are suddenly able to do. They've been pretty incompetent so far, and yet they figure out how to, one, control everybody at the table. You know, like they control their actions, they control their mouth movements, they make them dance. They also, I guess, made it so that everybody could listen to the song. And then the big finale of this musical number is these really creepy hands come out of the plates and grab everybody's faces and throw them back, so they all end up on the floor. It's like, why did they even need Beetlejuice? If they can do this sort of shit, then they're unstoppable. Even if they're like good natured, and even if the family thinks that this is funny at first, after a week of that stuff, you're out of there. They don't really need Beetlejuice. I don't understand why they made him suddenly so powerful.
So it is Deo parentheses the banana boat song. Excuse me. So
all right, close enough.
yeah, and you are right. It is ridiculous. It's absurd, preposterous. And even so much so that I think I was reading that Tim Burton himself was like, what the fuck is this? And then when he like pushed it out for test audiences, he's like, people aren't going to think this is entertaining. But of course, as things work out that way, it became possibly the most memorable scene in the movie.
It's so weird too, because everybody's reacting differently, right? Different levels, I guess, of being into the song. Because Jeffrey Jones always looks like he's being mind controlled, or rather body controlled, right? His face is always surprised that his body is moving along and all that stuff. Catherine O'Hara, her eyes look surprised, but she sort of seems to be kind of in control of the song. And then Cam from Modern Family, he is 100% into it. He is like, he closes his eyes and he's just he grabs a salad bowl or something, and he's using it as a musical instrument. So there's not even consistency on how this affects everybody around the table. It's probably the most famous set piece in the movie, and also the one that makes the least amount of sense.
Yes. I think to answer your question about Beetlejuice, though, this is exactly the point. Adam and Barbara are just such good-natured people. They think this is going to scare someone, giving them like a good old time to sing a musical ditty together. And, they do have the shrimp cocktail that turns into the hand and pulls their face down. But obviously this backfires in the sense that, just like I said, they all had this rambunctious, righteous time singing this song together. And so they're like, holy shit, there's ghosts here. We can turn this into a place of, the supernatural or the a tourist attraction type thing. Like, kind of capitalizing on what we're talking about earlier with Jeffrey Jones, Charles commenting
the American
on
dream.
The American dream, the naivety of man, the politeness of just rural folk. He pitches it to pop culture, music, movie, television icon Robert Goulet, who's, I believe, his boss. That there is just such a Tim Burton casting, just in the sense of like, Robert Goulet has not made too many movies. The ones he did make, he would typically be himself or be a lounge singer of some sort. But in this, he's just like this character that's really draws no attention to itself, but it's fucking Robert Goulet. I just think that's endlessly fascinating, and one of the Tim Burton quirks that does work for me. Not just some, Johnny Depp bullshit, but just this kind of funny, almost, stunt casting.
But then again, kind of a missed opportunity to not put him in the musical number. Because you didn't have to have him be a singer.
Oh,
because everybody suddenly becomes a singer there.
Yeah, absolutely. If he wasn't there, you wouldn't need to have him lip sync anything. He could just croon those tunes out. So my next note here just says the juice is loose. And this is where the Maitlands basically learn that they're not going to be able to do this dirty work, so they're going to have to rely on someone else to do it for them. So they go and summon Beetlejuice, who just like beats the shit out of Jeffrey Jones, traps Catherine O'Hara against the wall, and knocks Glenn Shattuck's Otho down the stairwell. He like turns into this giant snake, and they tried really hard for 1988, but this is one of those things, does not age well. We're not talking Star Wars where this still looks breathtaking. We're just talking about, Tim Burton in a giant latex suit maneuvering the jaws of this snake.
It's a sock puppet. It's a lot of socks tied together, and it ends on something that is supposed to look like Michael Keaton's face. But Alex, I wish it made that much sense. It doesn't really, because it's not even that they call him. The only person that actually summons Beetlejuice in this movie is Winona Ryder later. He decides on his own to do this. Because I don't know if you remember, they're like frustrated, and Michael Keaton is like watching from, his hideout. And he's like, well, I guess now it's time to turn up the juice. And then on his own, he just goes and starts wreaking havoc. So again, what's the point of having rules of him having to be summoned when he can just do whatever he wants?
That's a good point. I don't have the answer. We can get Burton on the line, though. We can get him in on the Skype call, ask him. But yeah, he proves why everyone, or not everyone, but at least their caseworker warned him against him, because he's obviously just this terrifying madman who really can't be stopped. So then but they get him back to like mini size and throw him back on the model town. Do they say
his name 3 times? Is that what happens? Yeah, right? Gina Davis comes out and she like Beetlejuices him thrice. Which again doesn't make sense, because at the end of the movie, they get rid of him by saying his name 3 times, but technically they had already gotten rid of him at this point in the movie when they said his name 3 times. Like how does that work? Like, I can almost understand that they called him the first time, right? They dug him out, and now he's out there. And he's not gonna, he's gonna be out there until they put him back. And how do you put him back? By saying his name 3 times. Well, okay, they just did that. So why is the movie not over? Or at least, why isn't Michael Keaton out of the movie for good? Why is he still hanging out around Alec Baldwin's model homes for the rest of the movie?
Well, I was about to say,
it doesn't make sense.
He has I don't know why he bothers, because he's got it made in the shade just living in that model town, because he can just like create strip clubs and hot women with his mind. Like, I don't know why he would need to leave or go anywhere. I mean, maybe food.
Actually, Joey's agent reveals that she's the one that put the strip club there. Do you remember? Because
You're right. Yeah, she needed something to keep him distracted. You're right.
Yeah, but again, that means that she has the power to just solve this problem for them. But instead, she just keeps kind of reprimanding them for not being better at this, and then not really doing anything else to help them.
I still stand by what I said, though. He's the only man in a little town there full of strippers. I mean, there's no reason for him to leave.
And, when he gets hungry, he can always catch a fly.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a man of he doesn't have a refined palate. I don't think he's really... when a bear's hungry, he'll eat type mentality. Winona Ryder goes full on emo. This was like the most I remembered her from this movie, being a young lad, is when she's all, in emotional disarray and she's got the veil over her face and she's essentially writing her suicide note.
It's so dark and twisted.
Do you know off the top of your head how old she was at this time?
Yes. I looked it up because she says in the movie that she's 16. Remember, like, I think it was when Beetlejuice proposes to her, tells her that they should get married. And I was like, is she 16? Because I don't know how old she was in Heathers, and this was after Heathers. And yeah, I looked it up, and she has to have been 16 or 17 while they were shooting.
Yeah.
I mean, she looks really, really young. She also looks like Winona Ryder. Some people change a lot as they get older. I think she still looks the same, and the same she looked in 1988.
So she's sad. She's talking in veiled terms about basically wanting to be dead, and pretty dark for a PG movie. And this was one of the famous movies up there with Big and trying to remember what else that got away with saying fuck in a PG movie.
When do they say fuck?
When Keaton says like nice fucking set, and then like grabs his balls and then he goes honk honk.
I don't know how I missed that. It's really dark. But the entire movie has this tinge of I wouldn't go as far as saying that it's pro-suicide, but it's kind of pro-death, because the whole idea behind the Winona Ryder character, I guess, is that she's depressed and that she wants to die. She doesn't want to be alone anymore. And the presence of Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin as fairly well-adjusted ghosts kind of confirms to her that, oh, well, the afterlife is better than dealing with Catherine O'Hara's bullshit. And the movie never really does much to prove her wrong. It's all things considered, Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis are not doing that badly. Even if they hadn't unleashed Beetlejuice, they'd be okay. They look great. They don't have to go to work. And the movie paints Catherine O'Hara as this monster, but really it's not that bad. And they don't have to deal with her because they're ghosts. Whenever they want, they can just kind of go up into the attic, not deal with it. And they like Winona Ryder. So overall, it's not such a bad deal. I mean, out of all the many representations of the afterlife in pop culture, Beetlejuice representation of the afterlife and what happens when you die is not that bad. So I can totally see why Winona Ryder would be like, oh, this is cool. And like I said, I think that a more responsible movie would have worked to prove her wrong, would have worked to show us how much Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis are missing out by not being alive anymore. But Tim Burton is not interested in that, of course. He's just interested in, being quirky. So almost, I guess, by accident, the movie basically agrees with Winona Ryder. She doesn't kill herself in the end, but her best friends are ghosts by the end of the movie. So, I guess they kind of like split the difference there.
Her friends are ghosts, and she goes looking for them. She goes up to the attic, and she finds no one, because at this point, they've gone back to their caseworker, and essentially they're just like, we're going to do what we can to get rid of them. This is where we get the very famous prosthetic heads of them. Gina Davis lifts her mouth wide open, and her eyes come out by her tongue, and Alec Baldwin...
She's still hot.
Yeah, I mean, wood, as the kids say. And Alec Baldwin just stretches his face out. It's Tim Burton just flexing, like, look at how much money they gave me for this shit. So Lydia is unable to find her friends, but she does find a mini Beetlejuice he's like sunbathing in the glow of the neon light at the strip club. And essentially he's like, hey, they're gone. He tries to basically sell, hey, I can give you... what does he try to sell her? I know he explains like...
She says that she wants to be dead. And he's like, what? And then he's like, all right, well, I guess I can help you with that. But first you need to help me by getting me out of here.
Because I've got friends to meet. And he just starts riffing about God knows what.
Yes. And then somehow that leads to them being engaged, right? I don't know. I don't remember. There might not be any connective tissue there. But basically, by the end of this conversation...
He mentions that you'll need to marry me. But it's just kind of like a throwaway line. Like, the fine print that no one reads.
He was riffing.
Yeah.
He was still riffing, and Burton was like, well, fuck, now I guess this is a plot point. We need to go forward with this.
And so he's like, you need to say my name 3 times. And she's like, what is it? Like, well, I can't say it. And so then it turns into this just sequence of charades that's just preposterous. And
it proves that Winona Ryder doesn't know how to play charades, or she's the worst charades player in the world.
This is true. And then she gets Beetle easily, and then he shows a big carton of orange juice being poured in into a glass, and she's like, Beetle breakfast, Beetle orange. And I watched it with my sister, and she's like, how would juice not be the first thing you say?
Beetle Tropicana.
But eventually she gets it, but then refuses to say it 3 times because she figures out who he is.
Right. This is how bad the prosthetics work was in that previous scene where he was a giant snake. It took her this long to recognize that it was the same face.
It's like fucking if in the beginning of Endgame, if Thor saw Thanos and wasn't sure until he got right up close to him, and someone's like, hey Thanos, your beer's ready, and he's like, you. So she says no. She leaves him there. She goes right before anything bad happens between them. Adam and Barbara return. Like, hey, we're going to let you and your family stay here. We can be friends to you. We can help y'all. We're just going to stay in the attic and do our own thing type of thing.
This major development happened off screen, right? The conversation where they decided that they're not going to try to scare them away.
Yeah.
Because they leave the office of their caseworker, like we said, transformed into these monsters that are gonna go to town. And then Gina Davis kind of says, I like that little girl. And Alec Baldwin looks at her like, well, it's too late now. I think he actually says it's too late now. and then cut to them saying, hey, you know what? Don't worry about it. You guys can stay. You would think that that moment is the biggest piece of character and plot development in the entire movie. That's what their arc is, right? They didn't want these people living in their house, and now because they see in Winona Ryder the child that they never had, well, they've decided to compromise and sacrifice. Off screen, cutting room floor, somewhere else, not in this movie, not in this cut. What a shame.
It's not to be. So we think everything's going to be fine and end up here, but Charles has already gotten Robert Goulet and his wife, to come out. He thinks there's money to be made with turning this into transforming it into like a tourist hotspot. So Otho had gotten his hands on the handbook of the recently deceased and conducts essentially, a summoning or a seance is what he thinks, but as he's doing, so he just kind of reads it off. It's basically like the Child's Play manuscript, but he doesn't actually know what it means. And it brings Barbara and Adam to the kitchen table, but it's obviously something that it's, I think, basically an exorcism because it's starting to decay them away and just kind of deteriorate them and wiping them off. And so in a moment of weakness, not knowing what the hell else to do, Lydia runs back up and summons Beetlejuice to come in and save the day.
This is what I meant earlier. I would say this is the second most memorable moment in the movie, just because you could argue this is what you came to the movie for. Or at least if you watched the movie before, this is the thing that you remember, that at some point, after all the cock teasing, finally Beetlejuice is unleashed and he can just do whatever. It would have been more powerful if you hadn't seen him do anything before now, right? If you hadn't had the sequence where he turned into a serpent and he beat up Otto and Jeffrey Jones. But we've already seen him do some of that crazy stuff, so it's not as powerful. But still, he gets to do some magic tricks to get rid of at the very least Robert Goulet and his wife.
Yeah, he just thanks for coming, Goulet. He just disposes of them, basically like the strongman game at a carnival. And then that's the last we see of Otho as well. And at this point, he transforms into his wedding tuxedo, which that's the action figure. The one I kept out when I went through all my action figures recently, and I had one of Beetlejuice in the wedding tuxedo. So I've got that on my horror shelf right now, horror and sci-fi.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then Lydia's in a big red dress, and this fucking Pixar-looking character comes out to be the minister of the ceremony. All the while, though, the exorcism had ceased on Adam and Barbara, so they're starting to recover, and they're putting themselves back together. And they try to do what they can with saying Beetlejuice 3 times, but he keeps stopping them at every turn. I remember very vividly watching as a kid the part where he throws the zipper on the mouth of Gina Davis and then throws basically the steel plate over her mouth that's bolted down. He's just doing everything he can to get out of this. Meanwhile, her parents are doing nothing.
But he really isn't, though. He's shown us that he has almost godlike powers, so he's going pretty easy on them. If I was really interested in making sure that they do not say my name 3 times until this wedding has been performed, then I would just, get rid of him the way that he got rid of Robert Goulet. But he kind of like softballs it. With Baldwin, he teleports Baldwin to the model house. And then with Gina Davis, he takes his time. He does the zipper. He does the steel plate. You would think that with all his power and his desire to not be called away, he would have, come up with something a little more permanent.
Yeah, he's obviously a maniac. I think he doesn't even realize his own strength. In that sense, if he just vaporized, if he just Dr. Manhattan, Gina Davis, he would find no theater in it. He has to become like a clown or something first before he does it. And right here, he's just trying to get married. But eventually, he banishes Gina Davis outside of the house. She's able to, somehow quickly become friends with one of these giant sand snakes and ride it back into the house, and it eats Beetlejuice. Meanwhile, Jeffrey Jones and Catherine O'Hara have done nothing of help.
Well, he trapped him, right? Beetlejuice uses powers he trapped Catherine O'Hara in one of her sculptures, and then Jeffrey Jones, I think, he just tied him to a chair. Again, a lot of stuff that's more effective than what he was doing with Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis. It's crazy. If nothing else, the one person that doesn't do enough is Winona Ryder, because you would think that she would fight a little harder to get out of this situation of this underage marriage she's about to be engaged on. But all she does is basically stand there while Beetlejuice just manipulates everything into happening.
Yeah, and even then, like, Delia and Charles could kind of see the trend of what's going on and maybe try to say Beetlejuice once or twice, but I don't fucking know.
That's true. I hadn't even thought about that they still have their full. Well, you know what happened? They didn't know who was Beetlejuice or Beetlegoose, and that's, they had read two different versions of the script.
Beetle
so
guys.
They hadn't figured out yet. Beetlegeist.
So the unholy
Beetle breakfast.
Beetle orange. So the unholy wedding is ceased and Lydia is saved. Beetlejuice is out of the picture. We go forward probably a few months or so. The Dietzes and the Maitlands are living in harmony in their house, and Barbara and Adam are friends with Lydia, and they basically help her now with her schoolwork and help her with studying and whatnot. And she comes home and explains that she got an A on this test that they helped her study for, math test, and she basically at this point, I guess she's rewarded by them using their ghost powers to kind of help her, or allow her to do, kind of supernatural things, because she starts levitating and singing Harry Belafonte's Jump in Line while all of the trinkets and appliances around the house basically provide the backup music. It's a fitting ending to this farcical tale.
It's yet another instance of how the fuck did they do that? As far as Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis's powers, I guess they come and go depending on what the story requires. Why didn't they do something this creative when they were fighting Beetlejuice? They could have just made Winona Ryder float away from the wedding or something. I don't know, because Baldwin he doesn't even break a sweat here, and he's making a lot of things happen. And apparently he does it all the time because Catherine O'Hara and Jeffrey Jones are on the second floor, and they kind of hear the music and they're like, oh, I guess Winona Ryder got an A again. So once more, the movie ends with inconsistencies, and I guess it's fitting. There's also for no reason, the football players from a previous scene, like some minor characters, like throwaway jokes, show up to dance with Winona Ryder at the end.
I said like out loud, what are the football players doing there? And like they're not even properly on center. Like one of them kind of overlaps Winona Ryder, and it drove my OCD into a tailspin.
Yeah, that is just so weird. That's like they had one of those audience screenings, and they realized that the football players were a big hit. They're like, oh, we need to bring them back at the end.
Yeah. And then, of course, the closing, which, again, Michael Keaton just riffing, and probably one of the more memorable visuals of this movie. He's in the waiting room for, as he is dead now, and he's, I guess, waiting to speak to his caseworker, and he attempts to cut in front of, I guess, a witch doctor that's next to him, and in retaliation, he shrinks his head, and his head's getting smaller and smaller, his voice getting higher and higher. As a little kid, obviously, this was fucking hilarious. As an adult, the real comedy of the gag is that, the pick a number, wait in line.
Numbers?
Yes. Because, Beetlejuice's is like, 4,500,000, and then the guy next to him has the number 4. It's so, it's not, I don't know. I could be completely off base. To me, that doesn't really seem like a Tim Burton style joke. I found it to be really funny.
So what happens in the sequel? In the Beetlejuice goes to Hawaii. Does he have like the tiny head, or does the movie open with the procedure in which he enlarges his head again? Because I don't know that I could take a whole movie, even if it's only 90 minutes, of Beetlejuice with that tiny head and that voice. It would just get on my nerves really quickly.
You have to say his name 6 times to summon him in the sequel. Anyway, that was Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice. Yeah, let's go to real talk and find out how we felt about this for real.
Are you the guys hiding out in the attic?
We're ghosts.
What do you look like under there?
Aren't you scared?
I'm not scared of sheets. Are you gross under there? Are you Night of the Living Dead under there? Like all bloody veins and pus?
Night of the what?
Living Dead, it's a movie.
You know, if I had seen a ghost at your age, I would have been scared out of my wits.
You're not gross. Why are you wearing sheets?
We're practicing.
You can see us without the sheets.
Of course I can see you.
Well, how is it that you see us and nobody else can?
Well, I read through that handbook for the recently deceased. It says, live people ignore the strange and unusual. I myself am strange and unusual.
You look like a regular girl to me.
All right, I am recording.
All right, real talk for Beetlejuice, episode number 2 in the summer of Winona. Hashtag Winonavirus 2020. Just a delightful movie. I honestly think this might be my favorite Tim Burton movie.
Oh, God.
We'll discuss, keeping in mind that I already explained about my hair, as President Bush would say. I have not seen Big Fish, so that is the big outlier that I have not seen as far as his most acclaimed movies. But this is very good. And obviously we'll talk to all the parts of it later, but like I said at the beginning of Contrarian's Corner, I do feel this is the most controlled Burton, and it really benefits from it.
That 90-minute runtime really did it for you.
Yeah, I mean, always. Academy Award-winning movie at the...
Same category as Suicide Squad.
Yes, the 61st Academy Awards. Let's see what was up against Beetlegeist that year. It was a short category that year. It was Coming to America, Scrooged, and Beetlejuice were the 3 movies nominated.
So it was really Michael Keaton versus Eddie Murphy versus Bill Murray.
That was a hell of a triple threat. And it was, on a grander sense, it was Tim Burton versus John Landis. I would definitely take Tim Burton in that fight. Anyway, Beetlejuice, the movie we're here to discuss today, again, is 84% on Rotten Tomatoes. And it's also, I wasn't just blowing smoke at the introduction of Contrarian's Corner. This is definitely on the higher tier of all-time favorites and very, evergreen cultural footprint movies that we've covered here on the podcast, which is interesting because it was only one movie. It's kind of rare you see things that have spawned as much, video games, toys, cartoons, fucking Broadway musical, constant references on television and film for the decades that followed. And it was the only one. Typically, you're used to seeing a franchise that instills that sort of notoriety. But one and only.
I mean, they were trying. It just hasn't happened.
From what I read, Tim Burton was all in. I think Michael Keaton and Winona were all in. But Tim Burton just, I guess, lost interest and wanted to make Batman. That's essentially what happened.
I mean, you could still do it. Don't invite Jeffrey Jones back, but then everybody else is still around. It's the official name was Beetlejuice Goes to Hawaii, right?
Yes.
That's insane.
Oh, yeah.
I would love to see how Tim Burton would shoot a Hawaiian movie.
There's no telling. So, being that it's 84%, that does mean there were some critics that there was a 16% that were verbose and outspoken. What were they all saying?
Yeah, the green splotches. I have a couple led by Gene Siskel from the Chicago Tribune, who said, an overly ambitious special effects comedy obviously influenced by the success of Ghostbusters.
Okay.
How's that a bad thing?
It's funny you mention that. I feel my attachment to this movie is very similar to what a lot of people our age have to Ghostbusters. I think that... So it's funny, that's the first quote you bring up. The way I've always heard people talk about Ghostbusters from their childhood is really how I feel about this movie. It wasn't quite on par with Star Wars or, X-Men or Terminator or something like that, but it was this really cool thing that I was into. And I really watched the movie a lot as a kid, and I'm not gonna say related to the characters, but played with the toys and really got swept away in the fantasy of it all. And yeah, that's not a disparaging commentary on Ghostbusters at all. I just think this was the movie I identified with in a way a lot of people did with Ghostbusters.
That's funny. I never even would have thought of that comparison, right? The idea that there might be some people that are like, well, it's Team Beetlejuice or Team Ghostbusters, but I probably land on Team Beetlejuice as much as I like Ghostbusters. This seems this is a little more up my alley. And I probably saw them both about the same time. I just remember renting them both on VHS, except that with Beetlejuice, I had no idea what I was getting into. I just went off the cover art, I think.
Well, the title Ghostbusters kind of helps to set the table.
Yeah, well, but the time that I watched Ghostbusters, there was, the cartoon was out, so I didn't even know that there was a Beetlejuice cartoon until last night or a couple nights ago when I was watching the movie, the Blu-ray, and I told you that it includes 3 episodes of the cartoon series. So with Ghostbusters, at least I kind of had an idea of, oh, Slimer, Okay, I have one more. Felix Vasquez Jr. from Cinema Craze says the character of Beetlejuice is hazy because the writers can never decide if he's a villain or an anti-hero. You agree with that? I think he's a villain. I think he's a bad guy, pretty clearly.
Yeah, I didn't really realize there was much room for debate. Tries to, I mean, he's captivating. He's, in a not so dark sense. He's the Joker. He's Heath Ledger from The Dark Knight in the sense of you want him on screen all the time because he's just so good at what he's doing. But yeah, what he's doing is not good.
At the end, though, when I remember this when I was a kid, I remember rooting for him when he first comes out and starts attacking, the Otto and Robert Goulet. That was, and I guess even now as an adult watching it, I was like, fuck yeah, just take care of them, even though I know that it's not good because he, then he's gonna try to get Winona Ryder to marry him. So do you find yourself cheering him on when he's just being reprehensible at the end?
It's kind of like the enemy of my enemy type thing. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing of like all those people in the afterlife. He kind of helps to clear the stage, but then the reason he does it, his motives are not pure, and that like it's for not a greater good, more of a greater evil. And so, but yeah, like when he shows up, of course you're like, yeah, take that, Robert Goulet. But I remember as a kid, and especially now, like wanting so badly for Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis to do away with him, say his name 3 times. And I remember, and again through this viewing, I'm kind of just wanting them to win. So it's, that's a classic pro wrestling trope. A bad guy does something to help a good guy out, but his motives for doing it still aren't good. So you're kind of conflicted as a viewer. It's a very simple yet layered approach that I don't think is utilized nearly enough in movies anymore.
Where is the Beetlejuice inspired pro wrestler? Would it be The Undertaker? But you need somebody that's a little livelier.
There was the Juicer, played by Art Barr in WCW. Fuck. I can't remember if he was directly supposed to be Beetlejuice. I'm looking up right now. Yeah, his face paint and whatnot. They originally called him Beetlejuice, but of course that was trademarked, and so he just became the Juicer. Art Barr was a hell of a wrestler too, so it's fitting that they found some dumb gimmick for him. And then, of course, there was Beetlejuice on the Howard Stern show. Yeah, to answer your question, there was a wrestler based off Beetlejuice, as there was any big movie happening of the late 70s to about early 90s. They would always try to base a wrestler off of there, or a show title, because there was wrestling Star Wars in the early 80s, and
where's Wrestling Infinity War? Where's the Thanos pro wrestler?
See, the problem with that is the promoters don't care about that, really. It's more of the wrestlers are just such fucking giant nerds now. Like, you follow me on Twitter, so I'm sure you've heard the name Seth Rollins before.
Yes.
His WrestleMania gear last year was like Thanos inspired, because his finishing move is a stomp. He does a 1-foot stomp. So he had one boot that was like bigger and looked like the Infinity Gauntlet. And of course I didn't get it then, and I've seen that movie now, and now I'm just like, God, what a fucking nerd. But here nor there, Beetlejuice. Move along to that next quote you had.
Yeah, we have one more clip. This is not a surprise, I guess, and I think he acknowledges it. Topher from We Watch a Thing Turns out he's not a fan of Beetlejuice.
Hey fellas, Topher from We Watched a Thing here, and it may not surprise you to hear that my take on Beetlejuice is not a positive one. A film that just begs the question, why is it called Beetlejuice? You take him out of the film and it's basically the same movie minus the worst acting of Michael Keaton's career. It should be called Couple That Weren't Interesting in Life Continue to Be Uninteresting in Death. Ryder's whole stone teenager vibe is actually one of the more credible aspects of the film. I assume she was drawing from a lived experience with that aspect of the role. She may well be the MVP of the film, with the exception of that last scene where she's floating and something. I can't recall it that well because the film is actually entirely unmemorable. Even Catherine O'Hara can't save it, and that is saying something.
So, sounds like Topher is a fan of Catherine O'Hara, like you, but he was not impressed by her performance in the movie. I sense that you disagree.
Yes, I don't agree with his thoughts on that. For one, Michael Keaton, I think, considers this his best performance, his favorite performance. And,
all right, let's start with Keaton, because that's so big. Do you agree? Is this your favorite Keaton?
I don't know. It's hard to say. It's really enjoyable, but I don't. I know. Like I can just hear people already scoffing at this. Me saying this. I think his performance in the other guys is like possibly it, just because it's like everything that makes him a good actor, but also just an unbelievably gifted comedic actor, all comes together there. But here, I mean, we joke a lot about that whole style of riffing and that Lino-Rama style of comedy, but here it just kind of, it works, because I also imagine it's not like there were takes of his that weren't funny or bad. I believe that like everything he did was probably fucking hilarious.
Yeah, this is what that style looks like when it works. Because even though he's riffing, it doesn't feel like the movie drags at all. It's super tight. You know, he's riffing, but he's going a mile a minute. So, he's in and out. He just did 100 jokes in that span. I mean, really, I mentioned I kind of like name dropped him in Contrarian's Corner, but it really made me think of Robin Williams in that sense, just how fast he was going and how like all over the place in a good way he was. I'd forgotten how good he was in it. I mean, obviously I remember him, but I just watching it the other night, it was so good and just so full of energy. And I'll give Topher this. It made me laugh that the idea that an interesting couple in life continues to be uninteresting in death. I mean, there is very little to those characters. I enjoy them. I think partly because they're good actors, so they can do a lot with very little.
That makes the story much more relatable, though, that they are so unremarkable that all they just want to do is just live in their house and they don't want to be bothered. Like, I think that makes the story more relatable if they were like bank robbers or something and were afraid someone was going to find their stash. I think that's part of the movie.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that I honed in on this rewatch as sort of a missed opportunity, and I brought it up in Contrarian's Corner, it's just the idea that we don't really get a big moment where they make the turn and decide that they're going to just let this new family stay because they like Winona Ryder so much. I think that there's a good setup for it. We're just missing maybe like that one scene where they have a sort of a heartfelt conversation about what they're losing and what they're gaining by this family staying, because I like it. It's very understated, just the idea that they were planning to have kids. They were trying to have kids and they hadn't been able to so far, and they were going to try again, and then they died, and then this girl shows up and they connect with her, and so ultimately that's what ends up convincing them that they can make this work out. But me saying this, I think that it is building it up more than it is in the movie. In the movie, it's just kind of like you can kind of see it, but the movie never makes it a priority for you to follow this through line. And I think that maybe those characters they wouldn't be so. I mean, they can still be unremarkable, but somehow have more of an emotional impact by the end, so that when the movie's over, it's not just about Michael Keaton eclipsing everybody, but also there was this sweet story about this couple that ends up having a kid, sort of by the end. But then again, I think it's obvious that Tim Burton was interested in just making it funny, and maybe that would just slow it down too much.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, it doesn't, the fact isn't really overly present because Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin are both so effortlessly good. One thing I read was Alec Baldwin doesn't like the movie and he thinks he's really bad in it. And I guess if you just think that in the sense that he's not the star of the movie, I don't think anyone's bad in this movie.
Yeah, no, the cast is top notch. It's just funny because it's just so different from our last experience. Like the problem with Mr. Deeds, or one of the problems with Mr. Deeds, was that everybody seemed to be on different wavelengths as far as what they were doing on screen. But here it's just everybody's making the same movie and everybody's working really well off each other. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what he's talking about. I think he's great. I don't know about Michael Keaton, but I think this might be my favorite Alec Baldwin performance. 30 Rock notwithstanding, if we're talking just about movies.
All right.
Yeah.
I was like picking my nails while you were saying that, and then I just like kind of stopped and slowly looked up, and I was like waiting for you to put an asterisk on that.
Yeah. Well, just because he is so it's so different from the usual alpha male characters that he plays in most movies, right? Here he's kind of a nerdy guy that he has a backbone, but he's overall just a really nice guy, and it's I don't know, I just found it refreshing. I don't think he's stretching any acting muscles, but because you're talking about Alec Baldwin, he is playing against type in a way, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
and I think he's funny.
Yeah. This movie is definitely the sum of its parts, and Baldwin, Davis, obviously Catherine O'Hara. Can't say enough good things about her in this movie nor in life. The novelty of Robert Goulet is a lot of fun. Glenn Shaddix is Otho. Just a couple things I found interesting as far as trivia goes. Because the production budget was so small, the effects were, at least according to legend, folklore, scripture, the effects were intentionally supposed to look bad to give it more of a B-movie type feel. Tim Burton originally wanted Sammy Davis Jr., a favorite star of him, of his childhood, to play the role of Beetlejuice, but studio executives did not like that idea at all, and I can agree with that. That would have been a very strange movie.
What do you have against Sammy Davis Jr.?
Absolutely it would have been nothing, but like him trying to act with like Winona Ryder. Now dig this, come on.
It would have been a very different Beetlejuice. That would have been great.
One for the history books, one for the record books in terms of what could have been. I did not realize Netflix had been around this long, but Beetlejuice was the first DVD sent out on Netflix in 1998.
Yeah, I started using Netflix when I moved to the States, I think like that first year. So that would have been 2002. So just a few years later.
Yep.
Yeah, that
Netflix
makes sense.
first launched in April of 1998. It was an online video store shipping DVDs in red envelopes. Because, DVDs started in 97, I want to say. Anyway, I just thought that was
the first customer they got was like Beetlejuice.
Winona Ryder. She's just like, I want to watch this movie. And then there's a lot around this movie, a lot of history, trivia, and whatnot, but just for the sake of time and the most interesting points, Kirstie Alley was the first choice to play Barbara, but the producers of Cheers would not let her out of her contract to take the role. Sigourney Weaver, Linda Blair, Goldie Hawn, Laura Dern, and Linda Hamilton were also considered for the role. I really feel, obviously the movie was made with Gina Davis, but like all those women listed are all very talented in their own right. But I think Gina Davis brings that quiet, calming sense that's absolutely necessary for that character that those others don't. I don't know if it would have worked as well.
Yeah, maybe it's because at least, when you're talking about somebody like Sigourney Weaver or Linda Hamilton, my mind instantly goes to their action movies. So,
Yep.
And this character is just she has so much warmth to her that I don't see it working. But of course, we're talking after the fact, as we've seen the movie with Gina Davis, so that's just how it works for us. I mean, I would like to see Sigourney Weaver bossing Alec Baldwin around. Would have been slightly different dynamic. And I kind of get the feeling that she wouldn't put up with Beetlejuice's shit for a second. She would just kick Michael Keaton's ass.
And then Heather Langenkamp of Contrarians fame was considered for the role of Lydia after Tim Burton saw her in A Nightmare on Elm Street. Langenkamp, however, turned down the role because she didn't want to play a goth girl.
I think we're all better off for it. Heather Langenkamp, us, the audience, Winona Ryder. Let's get to it. Let's get to Winona Ryder, because I think she's great. I think she is really good in this movie, especially when you put it in the context of her not really being Winona Ryder at the time. This is like her second or third movie, and kind of like her first movie that was a hit. So to me, I was thinking about it the last couple of weeks since we recorded the Mr. Deeds episode, and just looking at the timeline and everything, and she really is kind of the let's say like the Jennifer Lawrence of her time. Like, it's that kind of career. I mean, we don't know where Jennifer Lawrence's career is gonna go, but the idea is like this young actress that takes the world by storm and makes a lot of interesting projects, and some of them are really big critical hits, some of them aren't, and some of them are big box office successes, and some of them aren't. But for a solid decade or so, it's like she's in the conversation and prominently, right? And everybody knows who Winona Ryder is, and everybody knows the movie might be shit, but she's good in it. Or I think, I would imagine casting agencies are always like, okay, well, how about Winona Ryder? And this is kind of like where it starts, I guess, or where it breaks through to the mainstream, as mainstream as a Tim Burton movie would be back then. So when you think about all that this is just the very beginning of her career, and she's doing really well, not just because I think she's doing more than holding her own against much more experienced actors. I mean, she shares the screen with everybody, with Keaton, with Davis, with Baldwin, with O'Hara, with Jones. But she's also just good. I mean, she's a 16-year-old that it's behaving like an actress. Like she's her delivery of the lines, and it would be so easy to turn the character of Lydia into just this really two-dimensional stereotype, like the goth girl that's kind of obsessed with death and whatever. But I think that she manages to transcend that. Do you feel the same way, or were you? Because you mentioned that you felt that she was kind of overshadowed by everybody else.
I think she is, but I think that's just because you're dealing with a murderer's row here. But she does hold her own. I mean, the scene of her writing the suicide note, I always thought was kind of hokey, and I still kind of do. But she's not hokey. I think the dialogue of the scene is, but I don't think that's not any failing of hers. I remember from being a youth and as an adult also, I've always loved the scene. I guess it's not technically the ending, but the last scene with her where she sings Jump on the Line, because the joy of that scene is so infectious, and her joy is infectious. You can read on her face that she was really having fun, I guess, being on those wires or whatever they were doing. And it's a very authentic scene, which one constant criticism for me personally that I've always had with Tim Burton is just all of his shit is just overly manufactured and doesn't feel organic. And this scene, the closing scene with Winona Ryder in this, and it's because of her performance also, and just the way she's fucking lip syncing, for Christ's sake. It's not like, she's, it's not a you can't handle the truth type acting. Just her body language and her facial expressions and just the energy she exudes. It's one of my favorite scenes in a Tim Burton movie ever. And it's because of her. And like when I think of this movie, I obviously think of Michael Keaton, but I've always thought of her in that closing sequence. I think she's tremendous. I think honestly, who gets lost in the fray here is Catherine O'Hara and Jeffrey Jones. I know we kind of want to walk the tightrope as far as, speaking positively about Jeffrey Jones, but the Charles and Delia characters are both great. They're both played tremendously. Catherine O'Hara is fucking awesome. But you have Winona Ryder, like we've talked about. Obviously, the three leads, Michael Keaton, Baldwin, and Davis. And then, like I said, the stunt casting of Robert Goulet. And then even Glenn Shaddix kind of steals a lot of the energy in the scenes he's in just because he's so weird and like has this very odd charisma about him, and so much attention just drawn to his haircut and his facial features and the way he dresses and whatnot. So if I were to say anyone was overshadowed in this movie, it would definitely be Catherine O'Hara and Jeffrey Jones. But there's not a bad acting performance in this movie. It's I use that expression, sum of its parts, a lot on this podcast, and I think this movie succeeds because of its parts. It's a filtered, focused, concentrated Tim Burton effort that is the players he has for it are like this ridiculous lineup. And it's not like, this isn't a Wes Anderson movie where we have, 40 people just casted for no reason. The cast is like, what, like 10 people?
Yeah. It's, and it's mostly in that house, everything that happens. So it's, he kept it pretty well contained. I can see how O'Hara and Jones are kind of mostly background. I mean, they're moving the narrative forward a lot, but I think that a lot of the big jokes obviously go to Beetlejuice, and a lot of just the plot goes to Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin. So they're not as big. I mean, I mostly think when I think of Catherine O'Hara, I think of supporting roles anyway, right? Like her killing it and supporting roles, and so this was no different. This is just kind of like what I'm used to, with her. And same thing when I think of Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin, I think of them as leads. So it's kind of like it all goes along the lines of what I was expecting. And then what I had forgotten was how little Beetlejuice is in the movie. Yeah. I mean, you told me that you'd forgotten that it was so short. And what I had forgotten was that Beetlejuice takes forever to show up, and that then he goes away again for a while. I was surprised. I mean, that they don't really call him out until we're like maybe halfway through the movie. I didn't mind it because I was having so much fun, but it's crazy that it's structured in a way where what you would think is the biggest attraction, you just get it for like a little bit, and then all the way at the end. I remember just renting this, not knowing what I was getting into, and then being fascinated, finding it all really, really funny. Like I thought Keaton was really funny, and like I said, rooting for him at the end. And that final scene where Winona's dancing, just kind of not disturbing me, but really it just felt weird. I like now as an adult I can see the joy that you were talking about, but to me I think it was the football players in the background. They just kind of threw me off. Now I mean that was definitely the first Tim Burton movie I ever watched, but now knowing Tim Burton and his sensibilities, everything makes more sense, and that feels like you said like a very joyous variation of his quirks. But I think that at the time as a kid, it just threw me off. It was like, it's such a weird happy ending, because Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis are still dead,
Yeah.
And this girl, I think that even as a kid, maybe I couldn't articulate it, but I felt that there was something a little bittersweet about this girl who was very unhappy at the beginning of the movie, finding happiness with two people that are no longer alive. There's something that's not like your typical happy ending. So I don't know. It all makes it very distinctive, which is it's one of the things I appreciate the most about this movie.
Yeah, like I said, it's all these things that Burton usually tries to put into his movies, these themes and tropes, is like we like to say, but not even despite itself, just because of the like brilliance through all of it, it just kind of works out in the end. And like you said, this happy couple that you're introduced to in the beginning, like they die fucking 2 minutes into the movie, but still when the movie ends, you're filled with like this sense of happiness and everything's going to be okay. And of course, you know, if you want to really get into it, you can always think about the aspect of that, and maybe that is the afterlife. Like there's people you can still help on the other side of this, and it's kind of course, as an adult, that's more detailed stuff you take away from it. Like I remember rewatching Source Code not too long ago, and like the whole idea of that movie just completely fucking me up because like I hadn't watched it in forever, and I'm like, oh god, what if that can really happen when you die? So I think it's Burton firing on all cylinders, and I think everything about it helps it and makes it, and all those casting things we talked about. It's a movie that, you know, we've talked about this so often with movies we've done. Yeah, you know, if this person did play that character, maybe that could have helped, or it wouldn't have made a difference, or would have made the movie better. I feel like anyone taken out of their role in this movie would have it's like a Jenga tower in a lot of ways. It just kind of would have fallen apart.
Johnny Depp
and just,
as Beetlejuice.
No. I like Johnny Depp, but as an actor, but no. And just like the scenery, and it does a great job of that whole idea of purgatory, or, you know, the afterlife, how the sets for that are just so drastically different than what we see in the quote unquote real world. And, you know, it's little things like that you just think, yeah, duh. But the fact that we've seen so many movies that don't go that extra mile to make things that are cartoony, it just kind of adds to why I enjoy this movie so much.
Did you raise an eyebrow when the receptionist, Miss Argentina, kind of like shows him her wrists? I don't remember what the context is, but basically it's a reveal that shows that I guess she committed suicide by cutting her wrists open.
Yeah, my sister goes, Jesus.
I'd forgotten about that.
Well, it was because she's like talking about the afterlife and purgatory, and she's like, and if I had known then what I know now, I wouldn't have had my accident. And then she lifts her wrists up, and then kind of like everyone in the waiting room kind of has like a muffled chuckle. And yeah, it's, you know, you got to remind you, you know, whose game you're playing. That being Tim Burton. Just kind of got to bring things down a little bit. The gentleman that put together the screenplay for this movie, Michael McDowell and Warren Sakarin. I do apologize if I'm mispronouncing. Looks like both of them are no longer with us. Both died at fairly young ages. But I was trying to see. It didn't look like they had done too much else that I was overly familiar with. McDowell, I believe, was he wrote like horror paperbacks. He was more of like a literary writer.
Huh.
So I guess that would make sense. At least the horror influence is coming in. And then Sakarin, he looks like I'm reading this right now, he was the driving force behind the distribution of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a film in which he took a personal financial stake. So he is a great man.
So both horror buffs.
Yes.
Do you think they still hang out with Tim Burton? Like they haunt his house, and when Tim Burton comes back from a particularly good day of shooting, they just make him float and dance to Harry Belafonte.
They open their mouths really wide and have their eyeballs pop out by their tongue, and you know, and yeah, and then Warren wrote. He was on the screenplay for the Batman, the Tim Burton Batman that came out the following year. And then because I never got to my original stuff, it was released on March 30th of 1988. As I had mentioned, I could have sworn it was more of an early 90s movie. Budget of $15 million with an original box office return of a little bit over $74 million. I think it's safe to say in the 32 years since this movie's been out, it's probably made a little bit more than $75 million.
I would imagine. I mean, and that's not even factoring in the Broadway musical.
So I'm not going to put this in, you know, my all-time top 5, top 10. I will say I took a lot away from it. This is my first time watching it in a long time. Maybe my first time watching it cover to cover as an adult. It's great. It's wonderful. I'm going to be buying the Blu-ray for it. I rented it for this watch. like I said, probably my favorite Burton movie. It's either this or his first Batman, conceding that I need to see Big Fish. But it's one of those movies, I think, that I don't really have an issue with all the people that do consider it, their favorite movie. I'm assuming, Julio, you're not adding it to the Oliveira top 20 or anything like that, but I think it's safe to say we both came away from this really enjoying it. Winona Ryder, no Winona Ryder, just the movie itself is really good.
Yeah, I mean, I love Big Fish, so I think that is pretty secure in its number one Tim Burton spot for me. But this is, I guess, I also hadn't seen it in maybe 2 decades, and I remember, like I said, loving it when I was a kid, like watching that VHS over and over. And my takeaway is like, oh, it's as great now as it was when I was a kid. Even if I'm experiencing certain things differently, it still works. I can still appreciate everything that it does right, and the few very minor things that it kind of, I think, maybe could have done better don't bother me at all. So it's just so good. And then Winona side too, like I remember, I don't know if you've ever had that experience with Winona Ryder or other actors. I mean, probably, when that moment when you realize a certain actor or actress is the same actor or actress of another movie that you love, but you'd never like realize that. I don't remember which movie it was with, but I just remember the moment of realizing, oh, Winona Ryder is the little girl from Beetlejuice, and suddenly gaining so much more respect for her. So that's also something that I kind of carry. Probably my biggest Beetlejuice memory is that, next to how much of an impression Michael Keaton made, I guess Winona also did, because later on, years later, I would kind of make that connection and take it as a real positive. So to me, I mean, I just kind of like you said, I can't imagine this movie done any other way, like differently, with different cast or different director or a different story. I'd rather they not do a sequel, even if they could get everybody together, because I just like it the way it is. I just want it to end here. I am curious about the musical because, they already made it, and I'm assuming it follows the same story as the movie. I think I'm going to hunt down the cast recording and listen to it and see how that goes. But I'm going to say 4.5 stars.
Yeah, I give it an A. I was about to kind of put a period on your review there with just like, we're not breaking ground with this. I think that's kind of why we've approached this from a few different angles. It's not news that we're going to say Beetlejuice is a good movie. I think a lot of people feel that way. And this is one of those episodes where, fortunately we do have the gimmick of the Summer of Winona, because got to find another way to approach it, because, God, I'm sure you could find millions of podcasts on the internet that break down this movie. But yeah, 4.5 stars from Julio, an A from myself. In the off chance that you haven't seen it, definitely recommend a rewatch. So the action figure I was telling you about, where he's in his wedding tux, it is the tux from the movie, and like I think I mentioned this off air, maybe on one of our last episodes. You could tell the Keaton figure, or the Beetlejuice figure, Michael Keaton was fine with his likeness because it kind of looks like him, but I had an Adam figure and it looks nothing like Alec Baldwin, so I'm sure he was just like, no. And I have an Otho that doesn't look a whole lot like Glenn Shadix. Whatever the case, the Beetlejuice figure I have, he's in his wedding tux and his head pops off, and the head under his head is a shrunken version of Beetlejuice's head. So, because he's wearing his wedding tux at the end when his head gets shrunk. Right. Yeah.
Have you seen the animation, like the character design from the animated series?
Yeah, I mean, I watched that cartoon as a kid. It's been since then that I've seen anything about it, but it's even more cartoony, right?
Yeah, but you can see, Beetlejuice himself. I mean, you can kind of see it as see him as a cartoonish extrapolation of Keaton. But if you look up Lydia, she looks nothing like Winona Ryder, or it's like goth girl, okay? And but then they went into a completely different direction.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, that's I mean, it's Beetlejuice, but then like Casper in a wig. Man, there were almost 100 episodes of that cartoon. God bless.
It's crazy. I told you, I only got 3 on that Blu-ray, and I don't know. I might at some point talk myself into watching them just for completion's sake. I was pretty bummed they didn't include any sort of commentary or behind the scenes or anything. But I guess it has the movie, and the menus are pretty cool.
Tremendous. So that was Beetlejuice. On the horizon next for the summer of Winona. Hashtag WinonaVirus 2020. Ooh, Alien Resurrection.
Yeah, our first bonus episode as we close May. Alien Resurrection. So going back to that idea of us kind of being part of this Winona Ryder autobiographical or biographical film, right? That opens with Mr. Deeds, where she's like at this crossroads in her career. There's like things that are about to get bad. And then we jump back to the golden days, the beginning of her career, where she has her first commercial success with Beetlejuice, her first collaboration with Tim Burton. Things are building up to something good. And now we're going to throw ourselves into this weird foray into sci-fi. Sci-fi Winona Ryder in a controversial entry as far as Rotten Tomatoes goes. It's a 55%. Now, I pose a question to you, Alex. Do you want to do it as a gray area episode, or do you want to do it as, I think at 55 it's rotten?
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
technically it would be. I don't know. Let's leave that decision. Let me do a little bit of research on it first.
Okay, I was going to say, it's our show, so we can do whatever we want. It's a bonus episode, so all bets are off. We can talk about it as if it was a rotten movie, and we're going to pretend that it's good, or we can do it as a gray area. We do have an actual gray area coming out later in the summer with Reality Bites. So, I mean, maybe we just want to save the gray area gimmick for that
Hey, I
one.
can't believe I hadn't asked this so far. What's the motivation between Girl Interrupted not being on the lineup?
I think it was just the Rotten Tomatoes score. It was because it's like what 70s, right?
60s, I think, something like that.
Yeah. It was like, so for the bonus episodes, I picked like the ones that wouldn't match. So you have Alien Resurrection at 55, you have Bram Stoker's Dracula at 71, and The Crucible at 68. So I think it's just that those 3 movies seem more interesting than Girl Interrupted. Have you seen it?
No, that was kind of the thing. As I know Angelina Jolie won an Oscar for it.
Yeah, it's kind of it's the Angelina Jolie show. It's supposed to be a Winona Ryder vehicle, but it turned out to be the Angelina Jolie show. So it almost feels more like an Angelina Jolie movie than a Winona movie.
It's probably for the better, because I do remember reading, like, I think Brittany Murphy has a fairly upsetting exit in that movie, and yeah, life portraying art portraying life type thing.
Whoopi Goldberg is in it. She's one of the doctors, or maybe one of the nurses. I don't know. It's an interesting movie to watch. It didn't strike me as like super fun to do. That
was my take. I just know it's one that's talked about a lot with her. I was just curious about your motivation, but I agree with you 100% that it's probably not a fun movie to do. Much like we're not going to. I don't think we're going to be doing Antichrist anytime soon on here.
It just reminded me, the guys from Beyond the Box Set, they just did The Room, or is it Room? I don't know, not the one that inspired the Disaster Artist, but the one with
Brie Larson.
Captain Marvel. Yeah, Brie Larson. Which is a good movie, but honestly, it's a really heavy movie to discuss, and they were struggling, and they noted that they were struggling to just have a lively, fun episode discussing the movie. So, yeah, maybe some of those are best left to, I don't know, our bonus episodes when we have a patron or something.
There you go. All right, so moving on to plugs. We will be appearing on the live stream for The Cure coming up at the end of this month, reviewing the movie Sliver, starring another Baldwin. So, keeping the chain together.
Can you imagine Beetlejuice with Billy Baldwin instead of Alec Baldwin?
Him just trying to push his nose back in.
I would just imagine him he wouldn't be able to keep his hands to himself. He'd just be like all over Gina Davis. Alec Baldwin had the decency to, restrain himself.
But that will be the last weekend of May. I believe we're going to be on there on May 30th, and we do have a promo to roll, so you guys can get all the details, and we will do that right now.
Can you imagine a world immune to all forms of cancer?
Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come for our 4th annual Livestream for the Cure.
And this year, we need your help more than ever.
Please join us May 27th through May 31st for 48 hours of live content from guests and podcasts around the world.
We'll be aiming for our most ambitious goal to date as we try to raise $10,000 for the Cancer Research Institute.
Please visit www.livestreamforthecure.com for more information on this year's event and how you can be a part of it. Together, we can make a difference.
So, Livestream for the Cure, yes, May 30th, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's our slot. Just join us. We'll be, like Alex said, we'll be doing Sliver. We'll be giving out a couple of prizes. We'll give an autographed by us Blu-ray copy of the movie, and we'll also be giving out my whole notebook of Contrarian's notes. And Alex, last episode I said that I thought it contained the entire Contrarian's run. I was wrong. I just looked, and it starts with Glow. That's the first thing on the first page. So when we did the Glow bonus episode, that's still a fair chunk. It's like goes Glow, Juno. This means war. The golden years,
The glory days.
Yes. So there's still, a lot of stuff. If you're curious about what I write down while I'm watching the movies that we watch before we record for the show, some of that stuff that never makes it into the show. Some of that stuff makes it and then gets cut. And some of it gets changed along the way. But yeah, I think it's for any Contrarians fan and for any fan of just, I don't know, behind the scenes stuff, it might be a fun memento. So what we'll do is what we did last year. Anybody that donates during our segment gets, kind of like a raffle ticket, and then at the end of the segment, we'll just do an actual raffle where we name the winner, and so that should be fun.
All right, and as always, want to give a shout out to the Festive Years who provide us with some killer tunes for our podcast. As you might be able to tell, we have a new track that plays by the Festive Years titled Don't Look Now. It's off their album A-OK. Be sure to check out thefestiveyears.com for any and all Festive Years needs.
Yeah, I was talking to Alex about this, and I had to Chris Lloyd, the front man of the band, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna feature Doc Brown. Yes, he traveled back. Well, I guess he traveled forward from 1985. But he said he's cool with us, like featuring basically a different song of this album throughout the summer of Winona. So we'll start with Don't Look Now.
Excellent.
And then we'll just do different ones in the subsequent episodes. Don't Look Now. You'll notice it when it starts. It plays. It's that riff that we've been using as background for the clips from Topher and Mitch and Ben. So yes, Festive Years. Just go to festiveyears.com. Follow them on Instagram, on Facebook, on Spotify. Find them everywhere.
All right, and as we've been doing for our past few episodes, and we'll continue to do so, want to give a shout out, thanks, plug, what have you, to our behind-the-scenes member of the Contrarians family, Miss Zoe Perez, who provides content editing, ideas, goes through the motions of posting on our Instagram social media accounts. She's the mind behind the madness, and we really do appreciate the work she puts in.
Yes, and finally, on our last perennial plug, Hans Rodgieser, the man behind our logo, fellow podcaster, also a novelist of renown if you're into zombie movies. And he has 2 podcasts, Nación Combi, which is about Peruvian current affairs. That's in Spanish, available in every podcatcher. His second show is Living in Peru, which is about immigrants to Peru when there's no coronavirus preventing it. That's in English, and that's on iVox. He has a website, which is mildemonios.pe. That's MILDEMONIOS. You can go in there for all your Hans Rodgieser needs, including his new novel, zombie novel, called Requiem por Lurin. Go ahead and check that out. Talk to Hans. You've heard him before on the show. He's a guy with very, very strong opinions about everything,
including The Fly.
Which, by the way, did you catch Of course you did. The fly reference in Beetlejuice.
Remind me.
So he is Beetlejuice is tiny Beetlejuice is in the model home, and he lures a fly so he can eat it, and then he catches a fly and pulls it in, and then the fly goes, help me, or help.
Oh yeah. Haunting.
I never would have gotten that if we hadn't watched the original Fly. So thank you, Hans.
God bless.
What are your plugs?
Not anything really new or groundbreaking. I did finish the 3rd season of Ozark, and it's awesome. And I often describe that show on here. I know regularly I describe that show as junk food television. This season, though, featured a new character. Laura Linney has a brother named Ben in this, and it's played by a gentleman by the name of Tom Pelfrey. I do apologize if mispronouncing the name, but his performance as Ben on this show is like the first thing that's taken the show from a daytime soap opera with a massive budget to something of high class and notoriety. And
oh wow,
yeah, his individual performance is like, I don't know, I guess Golden Globes, Emmys is what the show could win. But that dude, it's pretty unbelievable how good he is. Like as good of acting as I've seen in anything in recent memory. So if you haven't watched Ozark, fucking watch it. It's awesome. It's big and loud and dumb. But then when you get to the 3rd season and Mr. Pelfrey shows up, it definitely ups the stakes. And then a show I completely forgot about until I saw the trailer for the 2nd season. Man, these Netflix shows are great. They're just disposable. Like it's not like, the old days where we have to wait a week. You can just kind of binge these shows, enjoy it, and forget about it, especially right now in quarantine. Dead to Me, Dead to You.
The Christina Applegate and Hawkeye's wife.
I was going to say Daphne, but Miss Linda Cardellini. The 2nd season of that comes out this week, and I think I watched that show in like a weekend, so I might just do the same again for this. But Ozark. And again, not to discredit anyone else on the show, like Jason Bateman in particular shines because he does a lot of the episodes he directs also. And I mean, we've talked about what an untapped talent he is. And but yeah, this dude in the 3rd season just took it to a whole different stratosphere. So anyway, Julio, what about yourself?
Just 2 quick plugs. First off, I rewatched Snowpiercer because my wife decided that she wanted to check it out. And I was like, sure. I hadn't seen it since it came out in theaters, and it's even better, I think, on rewatch. Have you seen Snowpiercer?
I have not.
It's on Netflix. Captain America himself. Before, at least in my mind, this is before we were 100% taking Chris Evans seriously. He had already been Captain America, but I remember the key difference between me watching Snowpiercer when it came out a few years ago and me watching Snowpiercer now was that I was not kind of rattled by seeing Chris Evans play some really, really dark, serious scenes. And I think that the first time I watched it, it threw me off. Things get pretty dramatic and dark towards the end. And I was taken out of the movie a little bit by the casting. I was just like, that's Chris Evans trying too hard. And watching it this time, I was like, no, that's perfect. He's great. The problem was me all along. So it's a great movie. It looks great. It's a lot of fun. It's really worth watching. If you're trying to build yourself up to watch Parasite down the line, well, this one's in English, so you can start there and then decide that you actually like what this director does and then move on to his recent Oscar winner.
There you go.
The other thing is a plug for my appearance on the Countdown podcast. It was I don't remember if I told you about it, Alex, off mic, but I was talking to Paul, one of the hosts there, about them doing a little clip for the Summer of Winona, and he asked me if I wanted to be in the show in a bonus episode that his co-host Wayne wasn't going to be in because. So Paul has a list of his top 100 movies, which I'm guessing you don't have. I know I didn't have. The idea of ranking my favorite movies from 1 to 100, it just seemed it was too daunting. But that was the thing that Paul has it and Wayne doesn't want to do a list of 100 favorite movies. So what Paul's doing is he's breaking it up in chunks of 10 movies. And so he's going to be talking about chunks of 10 movies with different podcasters. And I was the first one. So I did spots 91 to 100. So I had to make my list of top 100 movies and then go on the show and talk about numbers 91 to 100. And he talked about his 91 to 100, and then next episode, somebody will do 81 to 90 and, and so on. And then when he gets to the top 10, that episode he'll do with Wayne. Who knows how far down the line. But anyway, it was a blast. It was, Paul and I have very different taste in movies. And, but also you're talking about your top 100. So no matter who even if I was talking to you or, our 91 to 100 would be so different. I imagine there would be no crossover. And predictably, there was no crossover on my list with Paul, which is what made it so much fun. And now I have a list of, I had to make this list. I put it together in, 3-4 days. So a lot of it's just gut feeling. A lot of it are movies that I wish I would have time to rewatch so I could feel better about their position on the list. But for something that I did in 4 days, it's all right. And so if you want to know what my top 91 to 100 movies are, just listen to that bonus episode of the Countdown. It's, like I said, a lot of fun. And, odds are that if you listen to us, you already listen to the Countdown. But if you don't, now is a good time. That's a good crossover.
All right. Well, we appreciate you guys listening as always. We carry on. We march on in the summer of Winona. Our next stop will be Alien Resurrection. Our next stop will be, once again, hopping forward in time to 1997. Or hopping around in time, I should say.
Short hair Winona.
There we go. But for now, that is going to do it for us here on The Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong, and we will catch you next time.
Short, scared.